Hi there, welcome to Key to Pictures. How to shoot in manual mode. It's so important to learn how to use your camera in manual because if you're always just throwing it into the auto mode, which means that your camera decides everything, then you don't really have any control over the outcome of your picture. Once you start shooting in manual, then you control your picture. You control how blurry the background is. You control how much exposure it's getting. And you're going to be able to take much better pictures than just shooting in auto. And just for the record, I shoot in aperture priority, which is the A on your little dial on your camera. And there's another video talking about why I use aperture and how to use it. Aperture is basically the same thing as manual. It's just giving you one extra step. But let's talk about manual. A lot of people choose to shoot in manual and they love it. But you need to know how to do it. So the first thing you want to do, say you're out shooting, first thing you want to do is set your ISO. So as a rule, I just keep my ISO on 400. It's a nice even ISO. It gives you a nice smooth picture, not too grainy, and it lets in enough light that you're able to get a pretty good shutter speed. The only time I change my ISO is if I am in a dark room or there's a dark setting and I need a faster shutter speed. So in that case, I would increase my ISO in order to make my camera more sensitive to the light, which would in turn give me a faster shutter speed. Whenever I decrease my ISO, it's because I have so much light coming in. Like if I'm outside and it's so sunny, noon or 1, 2, or 3, and I just have a lot of light flooding in, I will decrease my ISO because there's so much light and I can get a super fast shutter speed. But just as a rule, I keep it at 400. So first thing you do, check your ISO. So mine was at 500, so I just changed it to 400. Then the second thing you want to do is set your aperture. Remember, aperture controls how blurry or how in focus your background or foreground is. It also controls how wide your lens is open. Remember, a small number, the aperture, which is called wide open, so a number of like an f-stop of like 2.0, your lens is going to be wide open, allowing a lot of light to flood in, which also means you're going to have a very blurry background. And in contrast, if you have a very high number, say an f16, then your lens is going to have a very, very small opening, allowing just a little bit of light to come in, and you're going to have a very in-focus background or foreground. Okay, so when I set my aperture, I usually set it pretty low, just because I like the look of that blurry background. That's pleasing to me. I think it looks professional, and I like to be able to focus in on my subject. And also having that low number, having it wide open, also means that you get a lot of light flooding in through your aperture, so you're able to have a very fast shutter speed. And a fast shutter speed is important so that you don't get that camera shake and thus get a blurry picture. So I'm going to set my aperture to 2.2. And I have the 50 1.8 millimeter lens on here, so I can go all the way down to 1.8. However, I don't like going to the very lowest aperture on your lens because it tends to not be you tend to not get really in focus and sharp pictures. So I, as a rule, don't usually go all the way down to an aperture of 1.8. I usually keep it at 2.0 or 2.2. So set your ISO 400. Set your aperture. I've got mine at 2.2. And then you want to adjust your shutter speed. And the way to determine how to adjust your shutter speed is through your camera. So your camera has a light meter in it. So wherever you point your camera, it's determining how much light is entering your camera, and then it's telling you that you need to have a faster shutter speed or a slower shutter speed. And the way that you know that is by looking through your viewfinder, and on the very bottom, there's going to be some numbers. You're going to see, if you have a Nikon, a plus sign and a bunch of notches, a 0, a bunch of notches, and a negative sign. And on Canon, you just swap it. It's the negative, 0, positive, okay? So when you look through there, you're going to see that setup, and then you're going to see a little cursor that will kind of travel around that line, either toward the positive or toward the negative. And what you want to do by adjusting your shutter speed dial is you want to get that cursor right on the 0. And that basically means that you have a perfect exposure according to your camera. So let's say I'm going to take a picture of you, of the camera, okay? So I would look through my viewfinder, and I am going to adjust it. I'm adjusting my shutter speed, and my shutter speed dial is here. Some people, it may be up here. Some people, you may have to push a button, and then it will turn into your shutter speed. You need to know your camera. So I'm putting that right on the 0, and then I take a picture. And that is technically a perfect exposure. I say technically. Sometimes your camera's off a little bit, so you need to look and determine what you like on your screen. But that's basically how you do it. And then when you're shooting, when you're out, with your kids, or you're shooting a subject and you're moving around, you're pointing this way and then you're pointing this way, you need to always constantly be making sure that your dial is set to 0 again. Because if I just took a picture of the camera and then I turn here, there's a bright window right here, and I take a picture without adjusting my shutter speed, then it's completely overexposed. You can see the blinking, and remember I have it set on a highlight indicator, and wherever it's overexposed, that means that's going to blink. So what I need to do is, if I point this way and I want to take a picture of the window, then I would have to adjust my shutter speed to get back to the 0, and then take the picture, and then you can see there's some blinking, but you can now see the tree and that sort of thing. It's not completely overexposed. So remember that you need to be very familiar with your controls on your camera. You need to know how to quickly change the shutter speed, and you need to know how to change the ISO and the aperture without digging deep into a menu, but learn how to adjust that just by some outer buttons. And then always be constantly making sure that that line is back to 0. And, play with it, practice, because that's how you're going to get better. And once you practice and keep going, well, then you're going to get better and better at it, and you're going to be really quick. I don't even think now when I do my controls, I know exactly where they are. I know my finger does this, my thumb does this. And that's just the route you just need to take. And of course, I want to leave you with a quote, and this is by Madeline Bridges. She said, "Give the world the best you have, and the best will come back to you." So I hope you make it a great day, and I'll see you soon.